If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
In the last two episodes of the Leading Learning Podcast, we did an after-action review of the Leading Learning Symposium in October. And so with this episode, though, we get back to our interviews with CEOs that are in the association world focused on the business of lifelong learning. So, Jeff, you had a chance to talk with Bruce Clarke of CAI.
That's right, and I've known Bruce for a number of years. I first met him a while back when CAI, his organization, was looking to do some blue ocean type strategy work, and so we came in and worked with them on that. And I've always thought of both Bruce and CAI as very forward-looking in their perspective on membership models. In fact, membership models was at the core of the work we did at that particular point in time, but then how learning fits into that, and not just education sitting off as kind of a revenue model on the side, but truly how does learning integrate into the overall membership proposition. So I was very excited to have the chance to talk with Bruce and get his perspectives on learning now. We know they do a number of interesting things at CAI. In fact, a number of times I have recommended to organizations to take a look at the Management Advantage program that they have. In fact, that's something I even included in Leading the Learning Revolution, and we'll include a link to it here. I think that's an excellent example of telling a strong value story and developing a strong brand for the organization and for the organization's learning products. But in this interview, we focus not so much on the Management Advantage program that CAI has, but on topics like peer learning, which is really core to what CAI is doing right now with its learning programs and how it's thinking about going forward. We talk about the role of community, and then of course we dig into some of the same types of questions that we've asked other CEOs in this podcast, around what it really takes to lead learning in the particular sectors and fields that they serve. So always, great to have a conversation with Bruce, and this is, we're happy to have this one documented here for the world to hear.
Yeah, it sounds great. So let's take a listen.
This is Jeff Cobb with the Leading Learning Podcast, and I am very happy to be joined today by Bruce Clarke, who is the president and CEO of CAI. Bruce, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Jeff. Good to be with you.
Well, thanks so much for taking some time. This is, as you know, part of our continuing conversations with chief executives at associations to get their perspectives on learning and education. And before we dive into getting your viewpoint on that particular topic, can you tell us just a little bit about who CAI is, who you serve, what you do for them, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. We're a 53-year-old nonprofit employers association. So we serve employers with literally between 2 and 20,000 employees with workplace information, advice, learning, development, and compliance assistance. And because the market really has a lot of employers in that 50 to 500 size range, that tends to be who we serve the most. And we're really trying to help them do two basic things, either or both. Minimize risk that they have in the workplace, trying to keep them in compliance with the complicated and myriad and thousands of rules and regulations around the workplace. And secondly, work with them to maximize employee engagement, whether that's at the first level, entry level in their workplace, or it's with their managers and supervisors in their workplace, but engage that workplace to do the best that it can at what it's designed to do. So that's a really kind of a brief summary of who we are.
Well, great. And I know, one of the reasons I know you in the first place is because you were somebody who was focused on learning and development, and we've done some work with you in the past. And I know you've seen a lot evolve with your membership model, your business model, the kind of value that you represent out to your membership base. Have you found that learning and education, has that role evolved? Has it become more important over time in terms of your overall value proposition?
Yeah, I think it has. We've been in some form of learning or training in all of our 53 years. What we found in the last 8 or 10 is that, in a broad sense, workplace learning, particularly around soft skills and manager soft skills, has really become some form of peer learning. So even in our classrooms, our facilitated peer learning style, we run peer learning groups that are specifically recruited and assembled groups of 10 to 12 professionals with a facilitator that meet monthly, less about a topic and more about the issues that are on their plate. Even at our conferences, we're using peer learning techniques where people are learning from each other as much or more as they are from any sort of a subject matter expert. So, yeah, that has become our model. We walked and tiptoed into it, and it really has begun to affect and impact every type of learning that we deliver today.
And so you then play a role in helping to facilitate that learning? Is that the value you're bringing there?
Yeah, it really is that. It really is about the process more than it is, at least in terms of soft skills training, more about the process than it is about lecturing or about what we would have done 50 years ago, which is get out literally the overhead projector slides with the bullet points of the 10 ways to do X, Y, or Z. And this is really more about pulling those ways and those methods and those, the ability to transfer knowledge and experience from one person in the room to another in a way that they're going to accept it much better, which is peer-to-peer, and it's experience-based rather than advice-based, and people receive that better. I think, unfortunately, as humans, we learn the best, and we learn our best lessons and our most important lessons by making mistakes. So if you can be in the room and hear from others that have made mistakes and share yours as well, that's part of that peer learning process too.
And have you found any resistance to that? Because that's putting yourself out there. That's taking a little bit of a risk. And I know we've seen in some of the things we've done at Tagoras, it's that can make people uncomfortable sometimes. Do you find that people are fully engaging and taking advantage of those learning opportunities?
Well, I think that it does a couple of things that are good and a couple of things that are difficult. The good is that there are many people still looking for and really in search of and having a hard time finding it, that kind of real in-classroom personal experience, and really to try to transform behaviors of themselves or of their team members, and not just to learn information that they might pass a test on. And so there are a lot of people looking for that, and I think it's become less common as there are virtual delivery models out there. So it's good. It's good that there are a lot of people who are looking for that. I think the bad is it does take time. It takes time. It takes commitment. It takes some dollar commitment on the perspective of the attendee. It's hard to deliver that same impact virtually. That's something that we're struggling to find a way to do. To try to blend other methods, to use an overused word, that blended learning, to find ways to have that same experience with some virtualness in the process.
Right.
I think that's tough. So it's good and it's bad. I mean, but we believe so strongly in it, and it's our differentiator. It's a gap that we found that we're working to fill. Whereas if you want to run a more traditional classroom or more traditional electronic delivery of training, there's plenty of people out there doing that, and we really didn't want to swim in that red ocean.
Yeah, I knew you were going to use the term red ocean as soon as you went in that direction. Right, there.
Right.
Now, so this is these more sort of, I guess, focused, smaller group type peer initiatives, but I know too it seems like from looking at your website, kind of following you over time, you've tried to expand out into the idea of the membership as a collaborative community, and I know you've got an online community going there. How does that fit into your vision of learning and the type of value that you're trying to deliver as an organization?
Well, certainly ideally, and the ideal is what we're marching toward. We're not there, but the ideal is that you've got anytime a member or an organization that you serve has an issue, has a challenge, a problem, a hurdle, or an opportunity that they've never faced, and they want to share an experience, that they could choose the mechanism they want. They could go virtually through the membership community. They could go back to the peer group that they themselves are an individual member of and meet monthly approximately on, or they could come to a topic-oriented session that's more like a class but still uses the peer learning technique in the class. They could pick any of those kinds of resolutions, or they could call literally another form of peer learning, call somebody on our staff for a one-to-one conversation about the problem or hurdle that they face. And in that sense, it's also peer learning because it's the best advice is experience-based advice. So we're really trying to make that experience in the ideal scenario available in several different avenues. What we find today is that some people gravitate more to one avenue or the other. that they're more comfortable with or that they feel works best for them, and that's okay. So the ideal is a bit elusive, but for now we're satisfied if we meet them in at least one pathway that's impactful to them.
Right. I think you're one of the first organizations I came across that has that sort of, phone in for advice, phone in for tips type model. So people, as you were saying, can actually call in and say, I've got this issue. And if they're a member, that's part of the service they get from you is you're able to either help them on the phone or refer them to somebody. I mean, does that continue to be even in this, web-driven world, is that continue to be a very strong part of your overall membership model?
It really is, and it goes back again. I think looking back on it, we didn't really realize at the time that this was a form of peer learning. It really is, because it's so experience based, and it's not just an answer. It's not just how many employees do I have to have before I'm covered by the Family and Medical Leave Act. It's not that kind of conversation. It's more now that I'm covered by the Family and Medical Leave Act, I have employees that are abusing it in these 3 or 4 ways. Help talk me through that and tell me how other employers have dealt with those 3 or 4 practical problems on the job. So that's where the person that's received the call can help diagnose what's going on around the problem, what's the context of the problem. And then we've added to that, I think the next step, once you start to view these conversations as peer learning, the next step is to bring in some talent, which we've done, who have worked in even larger companies, so they can bring some of that larger company process, larger company operations to smaller company HR to help them to grow, because they're not going to grow with some of the self-defeating processes that they have. And so that's bringing a voice into our membership that hasn't been here before. So it's all part of that.
And that's interesting. So are these people that are on staff, or are those contractors that you're bringing in that role?
The one I'm speaking of here is somebody that's on staff that came out of a Fortune 500 company that is developing new content for us that we call Learn and Go. The idea being that these are sort of mid-level processes, sort of that bridge between tactical activity and strategic thought. That thing that's in between, that's called implementation and process. And he's written a lot of content, a lot of tools and templates, a lot of things that people can take and learn and then go put it in place and get it going, with some limited conversation from him under that same telephone advice model. So it's really been so powerful once we bought into this concept of peer learning, how many tentacles it has.
I think that's fascinating, because you're developing talent around that now internally to empower you to deliver it and to deliver the value that it promises.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sure.
And as you've come along with this and gotten into peer learning and kind of considered the direction you head in as an organization, I assume there's got to be some change management that goes along in terms of making sure your board's on board, the staff's on board. How fluid has this evolution been for you? To what extent have you had to kind of step up as a leader and say, look, we're going in this direction, folks, and here's how we need to invest to make it happen?
Well, that's a great question. So our board is very supportive. The board is made up of CEOs. They're not HR professionals, and HR is our typical topic zone we're working in day to day. And so what they're expecting us to do is to keep the model fresh, to keep it relevant, and that's been our obligation, to come to them and say, this is how we're planning to do that, or this is how we are doing that. And they've been very affirming and supportive of that, and glad that we're focused that way. And the staff, you get it's such a good question, Jeff, because you get all variety of responses, and it's not that the same person gives the same response every day. It's very situational. So somebody may have a phone call with a member who asked that question about how many employees do I have to be covered by this federal law, and they went the next step and asked a couple of open-ended questions that we recommend to see what the context of that question is, and they have a great experience with that, and they see that what was behind that question was much more impactful and moved that company and that professional forward, rather than just checking the box on that compliance question. So you get days like that where people see that, and then you get other days where they don't see that context, and they say, well, they were just asking this compliance question, and I let it drop there, and didn't ask the open-ended to find the context. And so you have, step forward and half a step back. But it's understandable, because if somebody's spent their entire career answering questions, it's a bit of a change to layer in the have that peer conversation.
That's interesting. Yeah, to have to turn it around and ask some questions themselves, and as you were saying, those more open-ended type questions where you may get at something that wasn't as obvious at first.
Right.
Interesting. So, obviously doing a lot with peer learning, doing a lot with this idea of collaboration and bringing the staff along. As you look to the future, what are you seeing as some of the new opportunities, or are there areas that you want to get into as far as learning and education go that that you're only in the beginning stages of now, or maybe haven't even put a toe in the water with yet?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is something that we mentioned earlier is some sort of alternate delivery model, some sort of model that says you don't have to leave your place of work, or yes, we can serve your outpost in Nevada. Even though your headquarters is in North Carolina, it's just very tough. We're spending a lot of time on that. We're trying to figure that out. We're trying to find successful models. We found pieces of successful models. Really haven't seen a uniform solution yet that we think would work well for us. And then you go into all the questions of is it economically viable? Will people pay for what it costs to develop high quality, alternatively delivered peer style learning? And the jury's out on that. We're not sure yet. The answer could be no. We think the answer is going to be yes, somewhat, and growing over time.
Right.
Get in early enough in it to do a good job and learn from it. But again, the jury's somewhat out on that. Love to hear your thoughts on that someday as well.
Well, and do you feel like the economic question is the biggest one there? If the economics are right, do you find you've got a membership that will do this, or there's still some hurdles to get over as far as that goes?
Well, I think to a little bit to the same extent that it's a subset of people that want to come be in a room in person and maybe spend 2 days or 3 days on a course. There's already not a majority willing to do that. So I don't think there's a majority that want or would embrace alternate delivery at the price points that'll probably be required to support it. But I think there'll be enough, and I think that group is going to grow. You're still going to have the employer still, regardless of what the cost is to do the training, they are still going to have to, put an emphasis on it. They're going to have to give people time to take the training. Pay them for that time while they take the training.
Right.
All the traditional hurdles are still there, other than perhaps a drive to a central location, and those hurdles are not insignificant. I was just with an employer today who said they do not allow their supervisors more than 15 minutes at a time on any kind of training or learning of that.
Wow. That's a tough barrier to get past.
Yeah. So that's a real hurdle. That's a wall, maybe.
And is that coming from, I guess, maybe the idea that training is necessary, but maybe they don't, in their heart of hearts, believe it's truly effective or truly, strategic to what they're trying to do as an organization, or is it just pure economics?
I think in that case, it's a combination of economics or / cost, and I think, frankly, the idea that, hey, we've gotten this far this way.
Right.
What's the compelling reason?
Yeah, I hear you. Well, let's switch gears for a minute, because I know you're somebody who, is obviously focused on your own organization and its success and growth, but that you're also engaged in the association community in general. I've run into you at Association of Executives of North Carolina events and that sort of thing. And if you step back and, think of somebody who just is a leader in the sector, and knowing that continuing education and professional development that's obviously a key function that associations play in our society and in our economy. In fact, I've often talked about associations as being kind of a third leg of our education sector. But things are definitely changing out there. It's not a foregone conclusion that associations are going to continue to be the leaders in learning and education for the sectors they're serving. Members obviously have a lot more choices than they used to. So I guess the big question is, from your perspective, what do associations and association leaders in particular need to be doing to ensure that they maintain a leadership role in lifelong learning?
Right, because it varies a lot whether an organization is into some sort of continuing credits kind of training, which many of them are. That's the typical scenario for many associations. And keeping up with that is one set of issues. I think that if the association is in the business of helping their members to become much better professionals in their field, or to impact their employers or their organizations at a higher level than they are, that it's a big challenge, and I don't know of a better method to do it than some sort of peer learning. I think the association that's going to be successful will either find that continuing education niche, or will find this transformation niche, or will eventually fail because what they're providing is information dumps, and that kind of thing I just can't imagine survives the revolution that we see out there in delivery of that kind of commodity training.
Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy, I think, between, as you put it, the kind of continuing education where it is mandated, or there is some level of compelling reason for people in a particular industry to do the continuing education. I think a lot of the organizations that are in that market have found that increasingly competitive, because if that need is there, it's going to invite in competition. But then on the other hand, you're talking about this idea of transformation, which I find increasingly interesting. How do you actually work as a voice within your field, within your sector, to truly help organizations transform and go to the next level? And it sounds like you're very definitely focused on doing that with the peer learning initiatives. As you think about, kind of bringing it back home again, though, as you think about your own lifelong learning habits, you're obviously a thoughtful guy, and somebody's trying to keep on top of things. So just at a personal level with your own lifelong learning, what are some of your habits? What are the things that you do consistently to make sure that you're staying on top of things and kind of know how to lead the organization forward?
I'm in several peer groups, some industry peer groups that are based on organizations very similar to us across the country. We meet in person, we meet by telephone, we have projects we do together. I have been in CEO peer groups through the Visage organization, for example, with really a good peer learning process there. I got to tell you, the thing that I learned the most from is from staking our team out on a vision where the path is not entirely clear and success is not certain. That's where you really do test each other and test your growth and force a lot of things to happen, both from a learning perspective as well as a behavioral and activity perspective, that you really would never have gotten to if you hadn't had that stake in the ground. And that's probably the thing that I enjoy the most and I'm doing the most of today.
So you're willing to make yourself and I guess some of the others around you a little bit uncomfortable with the idea that's going to promote learning.
Sure, and success. I think it's all wrapped up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Well, Bruce, it's been a pleasure talking with you as always. Before we wrap up, I wanted to make sure that folks know how to find CAI, so they can look into what you're doing with peer learning and just find out about the organization, and then also where they might be able to find you online if they wanted to connect with you.
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn, Bruce Clarke with an E on Clarke. So I'm on LinkedIn in Raleigh, North Carolina. Is a good thing to run with that search. And capital.org, capital.org is our organization's website. You can get my email and other contact information and phone numbers through that, and certainly appreciate and would welcome any kind of questions or inquiry from your audience.
Well, great. I've always thought it was kind of amazing that you managed to get capital.org as your domain. Somebody was thinking ahead back in the day, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's an old one. It really is,
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks so much, Bruce.
Thank you, Jeff. Take care.
So that wraps up our interview with Bruce Clarke. To get show notes for this episode, just go to leadinglearning.com/episode 15. That's the number 15. While you're there, you will also see various options for subscribing to the podcast, and we really hope that you will take just a minute to do that, to subscribe if you're getting some value out of the podcast.
And we'd also be grateful if you'd take a minute to give us a rating on iTunes. We ask that with just about every episode, and we truly hope that you will take a moment to go and do that. We'd appreciate it. It makes us feel good about our work, but it also helps others, more importantly, to find the podcast. If you've given it some recognition out there, it's going to come up in the search engines when folks are looking.
And please also consider telling others about the podcast. You can send a tweet by going to leadinglearning.com/share. That will auto-populate some text you can use for tweeting, or you can just grab that text and use it in your social network of choice if tweeting isn't your thing.
So that's it. Thanks again, and we will see you next time on the Leading Learning Podcast.